الله وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا ثم ما بعد. In Kitab al-Manturat wal-Mulah, Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala says in this chapter the miscellaneous ahadith of significant values. The hadith we're going to mention right now, perhaps one unique. We haven't talked about the subject, at all. That's why it was mentioned under this chapter. قال وعن أبي سليمان خالد بن الوليد رضي الله عنه قال لقد انقطعت في يدي يوم مؤتة 9 أسياف فما بقي في يدي إلا صفيحة يمانية رواه البخاري. This hadith speaks about Khalid bin-Waleed himself is speaking رضي الله عنه. Khalid bin-Waleed Abu Sulaiman, he says, in the battle of Mu'tah 7 swords were broken in my hand, which means I fought and I used 7 swords and each one of them would break in my hand. All that remained with me was a Yemeni sword. A Yemeni sword remained actually strong in his hand to fight until the end, radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda. Al-Hadith rawahu al-Bukhari. So what is this hadith anyway, and what can we learn from the story anyway? Do you know who Khalid bin-Waleed radiallahu anhu, right? You guys know who he was. When did he embrace Islam? Right before the conquest of Mecca. Right before the conquest of Mecca. What year was that? Jama'ah. Where are the ulama al-sira over here? Allah al-musta'an. لا وين الله يغفر لك ايش 20 هجرة النبي توفي 11 Mecca was the 8th hijrah. Mecca was on the 8th hijrah, right? So Khalid bin Waleed embraced Islam on the 7th, the year right before the conquest of Mecca. But what is the significance of his statement over here? You see, when Khalid bin Waleed radiallahu ta'ala he came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam on the 7th hijri year, he came with a companion with him. Who was his companion who came with him? Do you guys remember? Amr ibn al-As. Why Amr ibn al-As? They were buddies, but they did something together, and that's why they came to embrace Islam together. They always fought against the Prophet ﷺ, and they were the leaders of the horsemen in the military in Mecca. So they're always there. And if you remember the story of Uhud, in which the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba, they lost 70 of the shuhada of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, and it was the battle itself, they lost the battle. But subhanAllah, the reason for that is because of Khalid bin Waleed and Amr ibn al-As. Also, the year right before Khalid and Amr embraced Islam, we know that there was Sulh al-Hudaybiyah. Sulh al-Hudaybiyah, when the year before that, which is the 5th Hijri year, the Meccans, they could not enter Medina, and they were defeated after bringing 10,000 warriors, right? So then when they went back on the 6th Hijri year, the Prophet ﷺ went to Mecca to do Umrah with a group of the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum. They were denied entry and they had to go back, but they made the Sulh al-Hudaybiyah, which is the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, in which they had peace for 10 years. No fighting, no battles whatsoever. The year after, Khalid and Amr, they together went to Rasulullah ﷺ in Medina and they embraced Islam. So after fighting against the Prophet ﷺ, all these battles, they came to embrace Islam. Rasulullah ﷺ, he never held grudge. He doesn't hold grudge in his heart. He knew what Amr did. He knew what Khalid did radiallahu anhu. But the moment they embraced Islam, what did the Prophet ﷺ do to these 2 men? He assigned military expedition under the leadership. Amr, he was sent out with a group to lead. And even Amr himself, when he came to the Prophet ﷺ and he started negotiating the terms of his Islam with the Prophet ﷺ, and finally Rasulullah ﷺ says, give me your hand so I can shake hand with you to the pledge to become Muslim. So when Amr extended his hand to the Prophet ﷺ, and he remembered something, so he pulled his hand back. And Rasulullah tells Amr, Ya Amr, what is it? I mean, what happened? Are you changing your mind or something? He goes, I have one condition. Which means I'm willing to become Muslim. I would like to move on. But I have one condition. And the Prophet says, what is it? قال على أن يغفر الله لي ما فعلت ما تقدم من ذنبي. That I want Allah to forgive me what I have done. Basically, he knows what is on his hand. The blood of many of the Sahaba who died in Uhud radiallahu anhu, and after that some skirmishes perhaps here and there, and then you have Al-Khandaq and all these basically even before that. So he knew what he has on his hand, radiallahu anhu. And he was so concerned that whatever he has done, this will never be forgiven because of the intensity and the severity of his sins. The Prophet ﷺ, he looked at Amr and he says, Ya Amr, don't you know, Al-Islamu yajubu ma qabla, that Islam erases all what that was done before. The moment you say, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, that's it, you have a pure page now. On this, Amr, he gave his hand to the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet assigned Amr to become a leader on one of those expeditions. He left. Khalid, on the other hand, he joined an army of 3,000 of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, and they went up north. They went up north to fight in an area near modern-day Jordan, which is way at the border of the Arabian Peninsula, reaching closer to at the time was the Byzantine Empire, like the other side, the eastern side of the Roman Empire. So when they arrived there, the reason for that arrival, because they heard that there were some skirmishes happening, and the army, that the Arab tribe, the Christian Arab tribes, they were kind of regrouping to fight against the Prophet ﷺ. So the Messenger of Allah sent them like patrolling the area, up in the northern borders of the Arabian Peninsula. The Prophet ﷺ, he sent on that army 3 leaders. He told them, he says, the leader is Zayd ibn Haritha. If he is killed, Ja'far ibn Abi Talib. If he is killed, he said, Abdullah ibn Abi Rawaha. And if he is killed, you choose from among yourselves. Now the fact that the Prophet ﷺ gave them 3 in a row, what does that tell you? He knew that's going to happen. And he knew that battle is not like any other battle they had before, because now they're suddenly they're going to meet one of the strongest armies of that time. They knew that 3,000 against how many? Hundreds of thousands perhaps. And that's what exactly happened. So the Arab tribes, the Christian Arab tribes, they called for help from the Byzantine Empire, their allies, and they brought them the military of the Byzantine Empire to fight against the Prophet ﷺ's army, 3,000 of them. Now when Zayd radiallahu anhu fought against, of course, this army, he was killed. And then Ja'far became the leader. Soon he was killed after that. And then Abdullah bin Abi Rawaha, he was also killed. Then the Sahaba, they just kind of like, what are we going to do? So they looked around to see who is going to be the one to lead. They chose who? Abu Sulaiman, Khalid Bin-Waleed radiyallahu anhu. Now Khalid Bin-Waleed, for those who don't understand the military skills of Khalid Bin-Waleed, he was one of the greatest generals of all time. If you read his history and what he has done radiyallahu anhu, you'll be amazed and mesmerized by the military subhanallah skills that he had radiyallahu anhu. So the Sahaba, they trusted the remaining people of the 3,000 in the hand of a man who just barely became Muslim. A man who just became Muslim recently, but they trusted him. And he radiallahu ta'ala anhu ardah, he led the army in an unbelievable way. So what he did, he started retreating towards the desert, because he knew that the Byzantine Empire, the Romans, cannot fight in the desert. They're good in their own terrain. In the desert, they can't. That's the Arab terrain. That's the Bedouin terrain. If they come into the desert, they lose. So he started retreating slowly and gradually. But as he was doing that, radiallahu anh, he wanted to minimize casualties as much as possible. So one of the tricks he did, radiallahu anh, during the night, he would send a few hundred of his troops silently during the night out in the desert. And during the day, as the people gather, he commands them to come in groups of hundreds, or maybe 20s and 30s and so on. And as they come and running through the desert, they stir dust, right? So the Romans, what do they think now that was happening? Reinforcements coming. And they see every few minutes another group is coming from the desert. Another group is coming from the desert. So now they hesitate. Also what he did, radiallahu ta'ala, every single day, he switches the right side to the left side and the left side to the right side, and kind of mix the armies, between. Why? so that when the Romans, they see the Muslim army standing the next day, they don't see the same people, the same colors, the same regrouping and so on, the same banners. So they also think that another reinforcement comes during the night. And he did that actually a few times until he was able to withdraw the entire army safely, radiallahu ta'ala, with the least casualty possible under the circumstances they had to deal with. But when they came to Medina, that's the thing, when they came to Medina, the Prophet ﷺ, they received them. Some of the people in Medina, men, women and children, they were actually throwing rocks at them. They were throwing rocks, not flowers. They were throwing rocks. They said, "Ya Furrar, Ya Furrar," like cowards. How dare you run away from the battle? But the Prophet ﷺ, when he heard that, he came out ﷺ, and he starts calling them Al-Balhumul Kurrar. Al-Kurrar, it's not the Furrar. Furrar means those who escape. Al-Kurrar means those who just kind of like running back to shelter, to safety, so they can fight back again. Which means they're not running away from the battle. They're just coming back to the strong, hold, so they can march again afterwards. And during that time, after the Prophet ﷺ heard the story of Abu Sulaiman, that he lost all these swords, the Prophet ﷺ, and that tells you that Abu Sulaiman, Khalid Bin-Waleed radiallahu anh, when he was fighting, he was kind of trying to kind of compensate for what he has done. So when he was fighting from his heart, radiallahu anh. 9 swords break in his hand. And he still grab another sword and fight again. Until the last one, he said, the last one that saved, basically, that stayed in my hand, was the one that was made in Yemen. A Yemeni sword, specific in a kind of quality perhaps. So the Prophet ﷺ, he came to Abu Sulaiman, Khalid, and he named him in front of the people. He says, "Bal huwa sayfullah al-maslul." He is the sword of Allah Azza wa Jal that will always be out there fighting against the enemy of Allah Azza wa Jal. SubhanAllah, Khalid bin Waleed, among many of these Sahaba who fought in these battles, he survived hundreds, if not even thousands of battles. So after the years that he fought against the Prophet ﷺ, he just dedicated himself to the military of the Islamic State, radiallahu anh. And he was fighting against, of course, the Persians at some point, and then he was fighting against the Romans at another point, because he was actually fighting in Persia during the time of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anh, and he did impressive job. When you study his skills and his kind of strategy, is known as, he has a strategy called swiftness. And the meaning of the swiftness strategy is basically kind of like immediately, just after every victory, he doesn't rest, he doesn't let the other army rest. He keeps chasing it all the way to the end. They say that when Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, he dispatched Khalid bin Waleed, another Sahabi with him, was Iyad ibn Ghanam radiallahu anh, and he said, you go, one goes from the east, from the basically southeast, and the one goes from the southwest. So whenever you meet, and you need to meet in certain town, whoever arrives first becomes the leader. So Iyad ibn Ghanam radiallahu anh, he went from the southwest. At the first sight, where he was fighting against the Persians, he was besieged. He couldn't go anywhere. And he sent to Khalid radiallahu anh a letter like, help, I'm trapped. I need you to come to help me. So they said that when Khalid bin Waleed received the letter, he was already moving halfway through his line, his path, going there. And then when he received the letter, he immediately wrote behind that letter, he said on the back of the letter, he says, Iyaka urid, I'm coming. And they said, by the time that messenger arrived to Iyad ibn Ghanam, the armies of Khalid were already actually in the horizon. Which means he was moving an entire army at the pace of a one rider, radiallahu anhu. So he arrived there eventually, and he took leadership. He stayed there for some time, and then he was assigned afterwards to go to help in the Sham area, the Roman area, against the Romans over there. He did something daring no one ever did before him, and then he crossed an area in the desert between Iraq and Sham. Was very dangerous territory. He went through it in 6 days, and there was no water, no survival, basically kind of material to go through. But he did it with his army, and he was successful doing that, radiallahu anh. Eventually, Khalid radiallahu anh continued fighting in that territory until he died, and his grave is buried his grave is in modern day Homs in Syria. And for those who watch the news, you guys know what happened to his grave, radiallahu ta'ala an, and the site of his grave. During this current war that is happening, they deliberately were kind of targeting Khalid Bin-Waleed radiallahu ta'ala, because they knew what he had done to the Persians, subhanallah. And they're now paying back at Khalid radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda. When he died, he said he died on his bed. And as he was dying, he says, قال والله, I swear. He says, I attended so many of these battles, and he counted many, many battles. He says, you can't find in my body any spot on my body that doesn't have a scar from a wound by a sword or a spear or this or that. He says, but look at me. Be like I was chasing death everywhere. And I'm dying right now on my bed like a camel would die. Then he said, فَلَا نَامَتْ أَعْيُنُ الْجُبَنَاءِ, let the eyes of the coward have no rest. Means, look, I chased death and nothing happened. When death comes, it's going to come eventually. The question people ask, why? How come Khalid radiallahu anh didn't die on the battlefield? The ulama, they said, because Allah Azza wa Jal protected his sword. And since the Prophet called him Sayfullah, the sword of Allah Azza wa Jal, Allah would never allow anyone to break his sword. So he died on his bed by the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That was Abu Sulaiman, Khalid Bin-Waleed radiyallahu ta'ala anhu wardah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gather us with Khalid radiyallahu anhu in Jannat al-Firdaus al-A'la. Wallah. Any question, Jama'ah? Yes.
What's so significant about the Prophet accepting the Islam of Khalid Bin-Waleed and versus Wahshi, who participated in the same battle? And Khalid is leading the army, but the Prophet he has, like the story that I know he told Wahshi, let me not see you face off.
That's not authentic, by the way. That's not true. Wallahu a'lam. That's not true about him, no. I know that story, but it's not true about Wahshi. That the Prophet ﷺ told him, don't let me see your face. Like, I accept your Islam, but I don't want to see your face. I don't know that story actually that's authentic at all. Wallahu a'lam. No. Of course, absolutely. No.
Sheikh, is it true that Khalid Bin-Waleed did not lose any war that he personally fought in?
He didn't. He didn't. He was always successful in his military expeditions and battles. Radiallahu anhu.
And also I heard that even before accepting Islam, all the battle that he fought in, he had never lost. I mean, that's the part that
against the Prophet ﷺ, he did lose. But we know that he was very successful. He was such a brilliant military mind, radiallahu anhu warda. For those who don't know him, you need to read his stories, and you would see just subhanAllah, an amazing mind, radiallahu anhu warda. I read actually a couple of books on him in Arabic. SubhanAllah, I was mesmerized by his skills, how he was leading, radiallahu anhu. Of course, there's some questions about some of the things that he has done, radiallahu ta'ala, but overall, the Prophet ﷺ, radiallahu anhu, he was satisfied with him. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was pleased with him, radiallahu anhu. So there is nothing really can tarnish his reputation, radiallahu anhu warda. Wallahu anhu. There's one thing perhaps I should mention here about Khalid radiallahu anhu, because during the time of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, Khalid was the commander of the Muslim armies in Asham. He brought him from Persia, he sent him to Asham. Umar radiallahu anhu, the Khalifa, wasn't very happy with that. He didn't like Khalid to be the leader of the Muslim armies for two reasons. So basically, the moment Umar became the Khalifa, guess what he did? He asked Khalid to step down from that position, and he assigned Abu Ubaidah Amr ibn al-Jarrah to become the leader of the Muslim armies in Asham. Why is that? Some people, they throw all these theories, but the reality about this, two things. Number one, because Umar radiallahu anh, he thought that Khalid was a very, what should I call it? And his approach in the battlefield is so dangerous. So he was so scared for the Muslims led by Khalid bin-Waleed radiallahu anh, that he is going to just take them to their doom. He says he's so scared, and Umar, you know him, he's a very responsible person. he even paved the roads in Persia and Iraq and other places out of fear that Allah would ask him if a mule trips on the streets of Iraq or whatever, that Allah will ask him why he didn't fix the road for it. Can you imagine? He was so concerned about mules and animals, let alone of course about the people who will be led by Khalid bin-Waleed radiallahu anhu. So the first thing Khalid was, for him, is a kind of like a dangerous leader. You know what? You might take people into battles they cannot afford, so it might be really dangerous for them. That's number one. Number two, Umar, he has a certain understanding of asbaqiyya, which means priority in terms of the hierarchy of the Sahaba. Those who embraced Islam early, for Umar, they deserve better, basically kind of attention and respect and so forth, than those who came afterwards. That's why Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, he never made that difference, that distinction. And whenever he used to give their allowances, he gave them equally, all of them. But when Umar became the Khalifa, he said no. He said, I swear, I'm not going to make equal those who fought against the Prophet ﷺ like those who never fought against the Prophet ﷺ. So he made this distinction. So that's why he said, you know what? Abu Ubaidah, he's one of the 10 people Allah promised him Al-Jannah, and he's one of the first 10 people who embraced Islam. I'm not going to make him, be led by Khalid radiallahu anhu. That's his philosophy. Now, do you agree with Umar or not? It's up to you, but subhanAllah, it's a choice. When Khalid heard the news and he got the news that he needs to step down, some people, they thought that would be fitna. Like the army of Khalid, like why? I mean, we need Khalid to be there. Nothing. He said to Amir al-Mu'mineen, I'm your sword. He said, I'm your sword, I'm your sahm, which means an arrow. Whatever you want to shoot it, just throw me. I'll be okay with that. And he continued with that, radiallahu ta'ala warda. Wallahu a'lam. Again, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala jama'akum jami'an with Khalid radiallahu anhu jannat al-firdaus al-a'lam. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.